A Wild Irishman by James Whitcomb Riley. Not very many years ago, the writer was for some months stationed at South Bend, a thriving little city of northern Indiana, its main population on the one side of the St. Joseph River, but quite a respectable fraction thereof taking its industrial way to the opposite shore, and there gaining an audience and a hearing in the rather imposing growth and hurly-burly of its big manufactories, and the consequent rapid appearance of multitudinous neat cottages, tenement houses and business blocks. A stranger, entering South Bend proper on any ordinary day, will be at some loss to account for its prosperous appearance, its flagged and bowldered streets, its handsome mercantile blocks, banks, and business houses generally. Reasoning from cause to effect, and seeing but a meager sprinkling of people on the streets throughout the day, and these seeming, for the most part, merely idlers, and in no wise accessory to the evident thrift and opulence of their surroundings, the observant stranger will be puzzled at the situation. But when evening comes, and the outlying foundries, sewing machine, wagon, plow, and other works, together with the paper mills and all the nameless industries, when the operations of all these are suspended for the day, and the workmen and workwomen loosed from labor, then, as this vast army suddenly invades and overflows bridge, roadway, street and lane, the startled stranger will fully comprehend the why and wherefore of the city's high prosperity. And, once acquainted with the people there, the fortunate sojourner will find no ordinary culture and intelligence, and, as certainly, he will meet with a social spirit and a wholesaled heartiness that will make the place a lasting memory. The town, too, is the home of many world-known notables, and a host of local celebrities, the chief of which latter class one found, during my stay there, in the person of Tommy Stafford, or, the Wild Irishman, as everybody called him. Talk of odd fellows and eccentric characters, said Major Bloney, my employer, one afternoon, you must see our Wild Irishman here before you say you've yet found the queerest, brightest, cleverest chap in all your travels. What day say, Stockford? And the Major paused in his work of charging cartridges for his new breech-loading shotgun and turned to await his partner's response. Stockford, thus addressed, paused above the shield sign he was lettering, slowly smiling as he dipped and trailed his pencil through the ivory black upon a bit of broken glass and said, in his deliberate, half absent-minded way, is it Tommy you're telling him about? And then, with a gradual broadening of the smile, he went on, well, I should say so. Tommy. What's come of the fellow, anyway? I haven't seen him since his last bout with the mayor, on his trial for shaking up that fast horseman. The fast horseman got just exactly what he needed, too, said the genial Major, laughing, and mopping his perspiring brow. The fellow was barking up the wrong stump when he tackled Tommy. Got beat in the trade, at his own game, you know, and wound up by an insult that no Irishman would take, and Tommy just naturally wore out the hall carpet of the old hotel with him. And then collared and led him to the mayor's office himself, they say. Oh, he did, said the Major, with a dash of pride in the confirmation. That's Tommy all over. Funny trial, wasn't it? Continued the ruminating Stockford. Wasn't it though? Laughed the Major. The porter's testimony. You see, he was for Tommy, of course, and on examination testified that the horseman struck Tommy first. And there Tommy broke in with, he's a mean and well, honor, but he's lyin' to ye, he's lyin' to ye. No livin' man e'er struck me first, nor last, neither, for the matter o' that. And I thought, the court would die, concluded the Major in a like imminent state of merriment. Yes, and he said if he struck him first, supplemented Stockford, he'd like to know why the horseman was wearin' all the black eyes, and the blood, and the boomps on the head of And it's that talk of his that got him off with so light a fine. As it always does, said the Major, coming to himself abruptly and looking at his watch. Stock. You say you're not going along with our duck shooting party this time? The old Kankakee is just lousy with 'em this season. Can't go possibly, said Stockford, not on account of the work at all, but the folks at home ain't just as well as I'd like to see them, and I'll stay here till they're better. Next time I'll try and be ready for you. Going to take Tommy, of course. Got to have the Wild Irishman with us. I'm going around to find him now. Then turning to me the Major continued, suppose you get on your coat and hat and come along? It's the best chance you'll ever have to meet Tommy. It's late anyhow, and Stockford'll get along without you. Come on. Certainly, said Stockford. Go ahead. And you can take him ducking, too, if he wants to go. But he doesn't want to go, and won't go, replied the Major with a commiserative glance at me. Says he doesn't know a duck from a pole parrot, nor how to load a shotgun, and couldn't hit a house if he were inside of it and the door shut. Admits that he nearly killed his uncle once on the other side of a tree, with a squirrel running down it. Don't want him along. Reaching the street with the genial Major, he gave me this advice. Now, when you meet Tommy, you mustn't take all he says for dead earnest, and you mustn't believe, because he talks loud, and in italics every other word, that he wants to do all the talking and won't be interfered with. That's the Way he's apt to strike folks at first, but it's their mistake, not his. Talk back to him. Controvert him whenever he's aggressive in the utterance of his opinions, and if you're only honest in the announcement of your own ideas and beliefs, he'll like you all the better for standing by them. He's quick-tempered, and perhaps a trifle sensitive, so share your greater patience with him, and he'll pay you back by fighting for you at the drop of the hat. In short, he's as nearly typical of his gallant country's brave, impetuous, fun-loving individuality as such a likeness can exist. But is he quarrelsome? I asked. Not at all. There's the trouble. If he'd only quarrel, there'd be no harm done. Quarreling's cheap, and Tommy's extravagant. A big blacksmith here, the other day, kicked some boy out of his shop, and Tommy, on his cart, happened to be passing at the time, and he just jumped off without a word, and went in and worked on that fellow for about 3 minutes, with such disastrous results that they couldn't tell his shop from a slaughterhouse. Paid an assault and battery fine, and gave the boy $1 beside, and the whole thing was a positive luxury to him. But I guess we'd better drop the subject, for here's his cart, and here's Tommy. Hi, there, you far down, Irish Mick, called the Major, in affected antipathy. Been out raiding the honest farmer's hen roosts again, have you? We had halted at a corner grocery and produce store, as I took it, and the smooth-faced, shave-headed man in woolen shirt, short vest, and suspenderless trousers so boisterously addressed by the Major, was just lifting from the back of his cart a co-op of cackling chickens. Era, ye blasted carry-onin', replied the handsome fellow, depositing the coop on the curb and straightening his tall, slender figure. I were just thinking of yez and the ducks, and here ye come quackin' into the prisance of Arialty, wid or canvas back suit upon ye and the schwim skins betchuckst er toes. How air yez, anyhow, and air we startin' for the Kankakee by the next post? We're to start just as soon as we get the boys together, said the Major, shaking hands. The crowd's to be at Andrews by 4, and it's fully that now, so come on at once. We'll go round by Munson's and have High send a boy to look after your horse. Come. And I want to introduce my friend here to you, and we'll all want to smoke and jabber a little in appropriate seclusion. Come on. And the impatient Major had linked arms with his hesitating ally and myself, and was turning the corner of the street. It's an hour's work I have yet with the squawkers, mildly protested Tommy, still hanging back and stepping a trifle high. But, as one Irishman would say till another, you're wrong, but I'm wid ye. And 5 minutes later the three of us had joined a very jolly party in a snug back room, with the chamber walls depicted all around with portraitures of huntsman, hawk, and hound, and the hurt deer, and where, as well, drifted over the olfactory intelligence a certain subtle, warm-breathed aroma, that genially combated the chill and darkness of the day without, and, resurrecting long-dead Christmases, brimmed the grateful memory with all comfortable cheer. A dozen hearty voices greeted the appearance of Tommy and the Major, the latter adroitly pushing the jovial Irishman to the front, with a mock heroic introduction to the general company, at the conclusion of which Tommy, with his hat tucked under the left elbow, stood bowing with a grace of pose and presence Lord Chesterfield might have applauded. Gentlemen, said Tommy, settling back upon his heels and admiringly contemplating the group. Gentlemen, I congratulate yez wid a pride that shoves the thumbs o' me into the arum holes of me weshket. At the instigation of the bold Oblony, axin the gentleman's pardon, I am here wid no silver tongue of eloquence to paralyze yez, but I am present, as has been represented, to Jean wid yez in a stupendious waste of gunpowder, and duck shot, and high wines, and ham sandwiches, upon the Silvonian banks of the ragin' Kankakee, where the D-Dipper tips ye goodbye wid his tail, and the wild loon scoots like a skyrocket for his exiled home in the alien dunes of the wild morass, or, as Tommy Moore so elegantly describes the blasted beard, away to the dismal swamp pshpeds. His path is rugged and sore, through tangled juniper, beds of reeds, and many a fen where the serpent feeds, and beard niver flew before, and niver will fly any more if ever he arrives back safe into civilization again, and I've been in the poultry business long enough to know the private opinion and personal integrity of ivory fowl that flies the air or roosts on poles. But, chongin' the subject of my few small remarks here, and thankin' yez wid an overflowin' heart but a dhry tongue, I have the honor to propose, gentlemen, long life and health to ivory mothers o' yez, and success to the duck hunters of Kankakee. The duck hunters of the Kankakee. Chorused the elated party in such musical uproar that for a full minute the voice of the enthusiastic Major, who was trying to say something, could not be heard. Then he said, I want to propose that theme, the duck hunters of the Kankakee, for one of Tommy's improvisations. I move we have a song now. From Tommy on the duck hunters of the Kankakee. Hurrah! Hurrah! A song from Tommy, cried the crowd. Make us up a song, and put us all into it. A song from Tommy. A song. A song. There was a queer light in the eye of the Irishman. I observed him narrowly, expectantly. Often I had read of this phenomenal art of improvised ballad singing, but had always remained a little skeptical in regard to the possibility of such a feat. Even in the notable instances of this gift as displayed by the very clever Theodore Hook, I had always half suspected some prior preparation, some adroit forecasting of the sequence that seemed the instant inspiration of his witty verses. Here was evidently to be a test example, and I was all alert to mark its minutest detail. The clamor had subsided, and Tommy had drawn a chair near to and directly fronting the Major's. His right hand was extended, closely grasping the right hand of his friend, which he scarce perceptibly, though measuredly, lifted and let fall throughout the length of all the curious performance. The voice was not unmusical, nor was the quaint old ballad air adopted by the singer unlovely in the least. Simply a monotony was evident that accorded with the levity and chance finish of the improvisation, and that the song was improvised on the instant, I am certain, though in no wise remarkable, for other reasons, in rhythmic worth or finish. And while his smiling auditors all drew nearer, and leant, with parted lips to catch every syllable, the words of the strange melody trailed unhesitatingly into the lines literally as here subjoined. One gloomy day in the early fall, when the sunshine had no chance at all for to gleam and shine and lighten up this heart of mine. 'Twas in South Bend, that famous town, whilst I were a strollin' round and round, I met some friends and they says to me, "It's a hunt we'll take on the Kankakee." "Hurrah for the Kankakee! Give it to us, Tommy!" cried an enthused voice between verses. "Now give it to the Major." And the song went on. There's Major Bloney leads the van, as crack a shot is an Irishman, for it's the duck is a tin decoy that his OWLD shotgun can't destroy. And a half a dozen jubilant palms patted the Major's shoulders, and his ruddy, good-natured face beamed with delight. "Now give it to the rest of 'em, Tommy," chuckled the Major. And the song continued. And along wid Hank is Mick Mahar and Barney Pants at the Shamrock Bar. There's Barney Pinch wid his heart so true, and the Andrews brothers they'll go too. "Hold on, Tommy," chipped in one of the Andrews. "You must give the Andrews brothers a better advertisement than that. Turn us on a full verse, can't you? Make 'em pay for it if you do," said the Major in an undertone. And Tommy promptly amended. "Oh, the Andrews brothers, they'll be there, wid good cigars and wine to sh pair. They'll treat us here on fine champagne, and when we're there they'll treat us again." The applause here was vociferous, and only discontinued when a box of Havanas stood open on the table. During the momentary lull thus occasioned, I caught the Major's twinkling eyes glancing evasively toward me, as he leant whispering some further instructions to Tommy, who again took up his desultory ballad, while I turned and fled for the street, catching, however, as I went, and high above the laughter of the crowd, the satire of this quatrain to its latest line. But R. Riley he'll not go, I guess, lest he'd get lost in the wilderness, and so in the city he will top for to curl his hair in the barber shop. It was after 6 when I reached the hotel, but I had my hair trimmed before I went in to supper. The style of trimming adopted then I still rigidly adhere to, and call it the Tommy Stafford stubble crop. 10 days passed before I again saw the Major. Immediately upon his return, it was late afternoon when I heard of it. I determined to take my evening walk out the long street toward his pleasant home and call upon him there. This I did, and found him in a wholesome state of fatigue, slippers and easy chair, enjoying his pipe on the piazza. Of course, he was overflowing with happy reminiscences of the hunt, the wood and watercraft, boats, ambushes, decoys, and tramp, and camp, and so on, without end. But I wanted to hear him talk of the wild Irishman, Tommy. And I think, too, now, that the sagacious Major secretly read my desires all the time. To be utterly frank with the reader, I will admit that I not only think the Major divined my interest in Tommy, but I know he did, for at last, as though reading my very thoughts, he abruptly said, after a long pause, in which he knocked the ashes from his pipe and refilled and lighted it, "Well, all I know of the wild Irishman, I can tell you in a very few words, that is, if you care at all to listen?" And the crafty old Major seemed to hesitate. Go on, I said, eagerly. "About 40 years ago," resumed the Major, placidly, "in the little, old, unheard-of town Carntiel, County Tyrone, Province Ulster, Ireland, Tommy Stafford, in spite of the contrary opinion of his wretchedly poor parents, was fortunate enough to be born. And here, again, as I advised you the other day, you must be prepared for constant surprises in the study of Tommy's character." "Go on," I said, "I'm prepared for anything." The Major smiled profoundly and continued. 15 years ago, when he came to America, and the Lord only knows how he got the passage money, he brought his widowed mother with him here, and has supported, and is still supporting her. Besides," went on the still secretly smiling Major, "the fellow has actually found time, through all his adversities, to pick up quite a smattering of education, here and there, poor fellow. I broke in, sympathizingly, what a pity it is that he couldn't have had such advantages earlier in life, and as I recalled the broad brogue of the fellow, together with his careless dress, recognizing beneath it all the native talent and brilliancy of a mind of most uncommon worth, I could not restrain a deep sigh of compassion and regret. The Major was leaning forward in the gathering dusk, and evidently studying my own face, the expression of which, at that moment, was very grave and solemn, I am sure. He suddenly threw himself backward in his chair, in an uncontrollable burst of laughter. "Oh, I just can't keep it up any longer," he exclaimed. "Keep what up?" I queried, in a perfect maze of bewilderment and surprise. "Keep what up?" I repeated. "Why, all this twaddle, farce, travesty and by play regarding Tommy. You know I warned you, over and over, and you mustn't blame me for the deception. I never thought you'd take it so in earnest." And here the jovial Major again went into convulsions of laughter. "But I don't understand a word of it all," I cried, half frenzied with the gnarl and tangle of the whole affair. "What twaddle, farce and by play, is it anyhow?" And in my vexation, I found myself on my feet and striding nervously up and down the paved walk that joined the street with the piazza, pausing at last and confronting the Major almost petulantly. "Please explain," I said, controlling my vexation with an effort. The Major arose. "Your striding up and down there reminds me that a little stroll on the street might do us both good," he said. "Will you wait until I get a coat and hat?" He rejoined me a moment later, and we passed through the open gate, and saying, "Let's go down this way," he took my arm and turned into a street, where, cooling as the dusk was, the thick maples lining the walk, seemed to throw a special shade of tranquility upon us. "What I meant was," began the Major, in low, serious voice, "what I meant was, simply this. Our friend Tommy, though the truest Irishman in the world, is a man quite the opposite every way of the character he has appeared to you. All that rich brogue of his is assumed. Though he's poor, as I told you, when he came here, his native quickness and his marvelous resources, tact, judgment, business qualities, all have helped him to the equivalent of a liberal education. His love of the humorous and the ridiculous is unbounded, but he has serious moments as well, and at such times is as dignified and refined in speech and manner as any man you'd find in 1,000. He is a good speaker, can stir a political convention to fomentation when he gets fired up, and can write an article for the press that goes spang to the spot. He gets into a great many personal encounters of a rather undignified character, but they are almost invariably bred of his innate interest in the underdog, and the fire and tow of his impetuous nature." My companion had paused here, and was looking through some printed slips in his pocketbook. "I wanted you to see some of the fellow's articles in print, but I have nothing of importance here, only some of his doggerel, as he calls it, and you've had a sample of that. But here's a bit of the upper spirit of the man, and still another that you should hear him recite. You can keep them both if you care to. The boys all fell in love with that last one, particularly, hearing his rendition of it. So we had a lot printed, and I have 2 or 3 left. Put these 2 in your pocket and read at your leisure." But I read them there and then, as eagerly, too, as I append them here and now. The first is called, says he, "Whatever the weather may be," says he, "whatever the weather may be, it's plays, if ye will, and, I'll say me say, supposin' today was the winterest day, would the weather be changing because ye cried, or the snow be grass were ye crucified? The best is to make your own summer," says he, "whatever the weather may be," says he, "whatever the weather may be. Whatever the weather may be," says he, "whatever the weather may be, it's the songs ye sing, and the smiles ye wear, that's a makin' the sunshine everywhere, and the world of gloom is a world of glee, with the bird in the bush, and the bud in the tree, and the fruit on the stem of the bough," says he, "whatever the weather may be," says he, "whatever the weather may be. Whatever the weather may be," says he, "whatever the weather may be, ye can bring the spring, wid its green and gold, and the grass in the grove where the snow lies cold, and ye'll warm her back, wid a smiling face, as ye sit at her heart like an OWLD fireplace, and toast the toes o' her soul," says he, "whatever the weather may be," says he, "whatever the weather may be. Now," said the Major, peering eagerly above my shoulder, "go on with the next. To my liking, it is even better than the first. A type of character you'll recognize. The same, broth of a boy, only Americanized, don't you know?" And I read the scrap entitled, Chairley Burke. "It's Charlie Burke's in town. B's. He's down till Jamesy's place, wid a bran, new shave upon, and the FH Huskers AFF his face. He's quit the section gang last night, and yez can chalk it down, there's goin' to be the divil's toimay, since Charlie Burke's in town. It's treatin' Ivory B he is, and poundin' on the bar till Ivory man he s drinkin' wid must schmoke a fwan cigar. And Mrs. Murphy's little Kate, that's comin' there for beer, can't pay 1 cent the bucketful, the whilst that Charlie's here. He's jumpin' o'er the tops o' stools, the both for an instant back. He'll lave yez pick the blessed fleur, and walk the straightest crack. He's liftin' barrels wid his teeth, and singin' Gary Owen, till all the house be stricken hands, since Charlie Burke's in town. The road yard hands comes droppin' in, and niver goin' back, and there's 2 freights upon the switch, the one on Aether track, and Mr. Geary, from the shops, he's mad enough to swear, and durst and spake a word but grin, the whilst that Charlie's there. Oh, Charlie Burke, ye divil, wid ways o' driven all the throubles aff, these dark and gloomy days. Ahone. That it's myself, wid all the griefs I have to drown, must lave me pick to reached a bit, since Charlie Burke's in town. Before we turn back, now, said the smiling Major, as I stood lingering over the indefinable humor of the last refrain. Before we turn back I want to show you something eminently characteristic. Come this way a half-dozen steps. As he spoke I looked up, to first observe that we had paused before a handsome square brick residence, centering a beautiful smooth lawn, its emerald only littered with the light gold of the earliest autumn leaves. On either side of the trim walk that led up from the gate to the carved stone balusters of the broad piazza, with its empty easy chairs, were graceful vases, frothing over with late blossoms, and wreathed with laurel-looking vines, and, luxuriantly lacing the border of the pave that turned the further corner of the house, blue, white and crimson, pink and violet, went fading in perspective as my gaze followed the gesture of the Major's. Here, come a little further. Now do you see that man there? Yes, I could make out a figure in the deepening dusk. The figure of a man on the back stoop. A tired-looking man, in his shirt-sleeves, who sat upon a low chair, no, not a chair, an empty box. He was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, and the hands dropped limp. He was smoking, too, I could barely see his pipe, and but for the odor of very strong tobacco, would not have known he had a pipe. Why does the master of the house permit his servants to so desecrate this beautiful home? I thought, well, shall we go now? Said the Major. I turned silently and we retraced our steps. I think neither of us spoke for the distance of a square. Guess you didn't know the man there on the back porch? Said the Major. No. Why? I asked dubiously. I hardly thought you would, and besides the poor fellow's tired, and it was best not to disturb him, said the Major. Why? Who was it? Someone I know. It was Tommy. Oh, said I, inquiringly, he's employed there in some capacity? Yes, as master of the house. You don't mean it? I certainly do. He owns it, and made every cent of the money that paid for it, said the Major proudly. That's why I wanted you particularly to note that eminent characteristic I spoke of. Tommy could just as well be sitting, with a fine cigar, on the front piazza in an easy chair, as, with his dudeen, on the back porch, on an empty box, where every night you'll find him. It's the unconscious dropping back into the old ways of his father, and his father's father, and his father's father's father. In brief, he sits there the poor lorn symbol of the long oppression of his race.